The reality was no one owns a demographic. You own a generation. But if you're not capturing the generations below that are coming after, then you're going to become less and less relevant as your generations start to die off. Through the pandemic, shopping habits changed substantially. Post-pandemic, shopping habits have changed even more substantially. And so those models are changing more and more rapidly than they have even before. So it's essential for companies to really take a look at themselves and what customers they want to have the attention of, and really making sure that they're adopting their approach to capture those customers.
Welcome to Challenger X, where we spotlight disruptors who break barriers, challenge norms, and shape the new rules for business. I'm Jerome Dwight, entrepreneur and business builder with over 2 decades of experience in fintech, healthcare, e-commerce, and blockchain. Today we speak to Garrett Denny, CFO of Knix, a transformational women's underwear brand built for comfort, confidence, and peace of mind. We talked about the need for disrupting your own business model to reject the status quo, the painful lessons Garrett learned as a finance leader at Sears, and focusing on the next generation of consumers and meeting their needs, and building Knix into a disruptive and transformational company. I loved it, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So let's get to it. Garrett Denny, welcome to the show. You are currently CFO of Knix. That's one of those brands that kind of came out of nowhere, and now everyone's talking about it. You've had quite a successful career yourself in a variety of industries as a finance leader and a strategic leader. So maybe just talk to me about your early years and what brought you into the world of finance.
Sure. So I started my career right out of school at Sears Canada. And, it was just a matter of luck. My next door neighbor was a store manager at Sears and offered to put my resume in. And all of a sudden I had an interview with the management reporting department at Sears Canada. And they offered to pay, they required you to pursue a accounting designation. And they offered to pay for it. So that sounded really good to me. And so all of a sudden I was on my way to from a BCom to pursuing an accounting designation.
Right.
So got a job in their management reporting department, running a bunch of different reports for all the different leaders of the company. And it's a great job to start at because you see what matters to those leaders. You see what reports and what data points are mattering to those leaders, and they end up giving you a lot of insight just by observing them. And so did that for a few years, and then I got involved in more of the guts of the business, the merchandising and buying teams, and became a financial analyst for the menswear team there. Really one of my favorite jobs because you're everything. You're their CFO for that buying team. You're doing everything from the most strategic of work of looking ahead 5 years and doing all these business cases to calling up suppliers and making sure that we're paying them properly. And so you're doing everything that is involved in supporting a business from a finance perspective. So it really broadened my horizons in terms of that and really developed me as a finance professional.
You and I are both CPAs by training, and I've always felt that the finance leaders that kind of get their hands dirty in the operations are the ones that are most insightful, makes them better finance leaders. Would you agree? And talk to me a bit about how you got your hands dirty with the operational aspects.
Wholeheartedly. I mean, what really served me well, especially at Sears and throughout my career, was I became that middle ground between, the people running the various parts of the business and upper management. Mm-hmm. And so I could speak both languages. I could sum things up and speak at that executive level because of some of my earlier experience as well. But also I was trusted at the business level. I was the person making sure that they were getting what they wanted, that they had their voice in what we were pursuing, as well as at the upper levels, that I was making sure that what they wanted was happening as well. And so I became, at one point someone labeled me the business whisperer at Sears because I was trusted so much by both areas of the business. And so that afforded me so many more opportunities through my career as I moved forward, because I became that trusted piece. I wasn't the person that was keeping an eye on the business, that was possibly a spy for the business. I wasn't the person that was just there to sign checks and call the suppliers. I was the person that was providing insight, digging into the details, understood the numbers of the business better than the people running the business. And I was trusted by both actions. So that really actually did well for me.
Now, Sears was one of those iconic brands in Canada, but somewhere along the lines, things went sideways. Can you unpack what your role was? Were there some decisions that you didn't agree with, or what was the journey with Sears?
I would say that this is a problem that was probably born 10 to 15 years before I even started at Sears. I think the department store model is a model that has become less relevant to the Canadian consumer over time. And it started with Eaton's. Eaton's was having its trouble in the mid-90s. Eaton's went out of business, and all of a sudden, everybody that shopped at Eaton's had to shop somewhere else. So all of a sudden, the Bay and Sears got a bunch of new customers. So they thought that was the renaissance, the revival of department store. It wasn't. They thought they were doing something that was pleasing customers. It wasn't. It was just the case that everyone that shopped at Eaton's was going to these businesses, but it was still declining. You're still having less and less. And what I learned at my time at Sears, we thought we owned a demographic. We thought we owned the woman that was 50 years old and older. The reality was, no one owns a demographic. You own a generation. And so you have generations that really love your brand and really love your model and will keep coming to you for years and decades. But if you're not capturing the generations below that are coming after, then you're going to become less and less relevant as your generations start to die off and fade away. And so what happened with Sears is, when I started there, it was the 50-year-old woman. 10 years in, all of a sudden, people that are turning 50 weren't really coming to shop there anymore because there were different generations. And we weren't quite grasping that. We had to go find out what those other generations want and how they wanted to shop, and adopting our business and adopting our approach to that. Instead, we just kept trying to lean on everything that worked for a demographic, and that wasn't working.
So you valuable experiences in what didn't work. So you leave Sears now. You've got this experience in working with really a success story for a while, and then some of the challenges. So what next for you, Garrett?
In my career, so I eventually moved on to Rexall, and Rexall is another example of, a company that's been around for a long while, but as you see, the pharmacy business has been evolving. So now Costco and Walmart have pharmacies. You can go pick up your prescriptions while you're doing your grocery shopping. You see Shoppers Drug Mart, they're becoming more of a variety store, a grocery store. A standalone pharmacy doesn't quite work the way it used to 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so for Rexall, that's the challenge that they're working through right now is, what are they going to be to the Canadian consumer that's relevant, that's going to get enough traffic to come to sustain that business? And so that's something that they've been working through as well.
Wow. So what is your thinking on the need for companies to periodically kind of disrupt their own selves? It sounds like if you don't, competitors will.
It's essential. It's becoming more and more essential. So, with models like the department store model or the pharmacy model, those ones took decades to become less and less relevant. Now with e-commerce, it's, certain models are becoming less relevant every 2 to 5 years. So something that was relevant, or an approach that was relevant for e-commerce before the pandemic, let's say, through the pandemic, shopping habits changed substantially. Post-pandemic, shopping habits have changed even more substantially. And so those models are changing more and more rapidly than they have even before. So it's essential for companies to really take a look at themselves, take a look at the market, take a look at how customers are shopping and what customers they actually have the attention of and what customers they want to have the attention of, and really making sure that they're adopting their approach to capture those customers.
I couldn't agree with you more. There's so many examples of companies that have a reasonable amount of success and don't think about the generation coming up that may have different preferences. Financial services comes to mind, certainly consumer goods. And so now you come to a very cool company, Nix. Talk to us about how you landed at Nix, and Nix has had some incredible success here in Canada.
Yeah, so Nix is a really a revolutionary company. Our founder invented the leak-proof underwear for women, so she invented the category. And there's a great example of on their growth curve pre-pandemic. They were selling in a certain way. During the pandemic, their demand exploded because shopping patterns changed, and then post-pandemic shopping patterns changed again, and we're seeing how do we have to do things differently to capture new customers from what we might have done 2, 3, or 4 years ago. So it's a company that is usually ahead of the curve, and we're consistently trying to stay ahead of the curve. And what we're finding is you always have to be thinking ahead of what's the next way of getting new customers and keeping those customers. How do you please customers? How do you attract customers? And Nix is trying to be one of those companies that stays at the forefront of that.
When I was doing the research on Nix, it hit me how much innovation has occurred by your company in a space that has been somewhat ignored. Intimate women's apparel, solving leakage issues. So tell me, where is Nix going, and why does Nix have such a cool story of innovation?
I think it's one of a story of being unapologetically free in terms of what we're talking about. It's been in the past maybe less and less talked about around period underwear or leak-proof underwear, and so Nix is a company that challenges that and says they want to have the conversations that haven't been had with women. It's a company that challenges the status quo and wants to make sure that we're empowering women, empowering young women, especially, at the age of when they, start to maybe need that product.
So Nix is now very successful. You were on track to do an IPO, and now you've been acquired by a major conglomerate. How is that with keeping the spirit of innovation going with now being part of a larger company?
Yeah, so the larger company that bought us really saw everything that Nix made Nix successful and wanted to embrace that and make sure that they weren't disturbing it. We're still a very managed company that we manage ourselves. We're not. They're very hands off and let us do what we think is best, and they're there to support and really learn. They want to learn from some of the things that Nix does well. So it's a very supportive relationship from that perspective, and so it was really the best fit at the time for the company because they brought resources and access that maybe we didn't have without that relationship. While at the same time, being absolutely supportive of the vision and the direction that our founder is taking the company.
Now, you come from institutions like Sears and Rexall, where there's a heavy physical storefront model for distribution. Is that less so with Nix? Are you more on digital channels?
It started out that way because Nix did start out as a D2C e-commerce brand. We are starting to open up a lot more storefronts. And probably the happy balance will be, it won't be like a department store model where you've got anywhere from 200 to 400 stores across Canada. It'll be more, we're going to have 30 to 50 stores across Canada and who knows how many in the US. But it will be a happy balance because, as I mentioned, the markets are changing, and now in e-commerce, digital marketing has become a lot more expensive. It's not as affordable. It's not as economical as it might have been pre-pandemic or even during the pandemic. And so, finding that balance of what's the right balance between selling e-commerce and selling at storefronts. There's still lots of people that go to malls. There's still lots of people that will travel in some of those busy shopping areas. That will happen upon the brand, and so it becomes more economical to sell them that way as a new customer than maybe trying to find them through Google or Facebook or other digital marketing efforts. So we really try and find that balance, and I think just the market in general is still trying to find that balance, not just Nix, but overall we're seeing that a lot of these D2C brands are starting to open up more bricks and mortar because it is a happy balance between the two.
Do you feel post-pandemic there was a big surge toward digital only, and now the pendulum's coming back a bit to a little bit of bricks and mortar along with digital?
Most definitely, just because the supply for digital marketing hasn't changed all that much, but the demand has. The demand has gotten probably double what it was pre-pandemic, and so we're seeing cost per clicks going up double to triple in some cases, and so that's where I say the whole market is going to see a rebalance, I believe, and economically, are you better to have the fixed cost of the bricks and mortar and the idle labor versus a very high cost per acquisition, customer acquisition cost?
Yeah. And for you as a finance leader, you're dealing with so many variables, whether it's cost of marketing, cost of infrastructure, keeping ahead of the growth curves. How do you approach the finance role now in a very innovative, high growth company like Nix?
It's difficult because it's difficult at Nix as it might be might have been at Sears or Rexall. At Sears or Rexall, it was you're dealing with merchants or pharmacists that have been doing the same thing for 30 years and want to keep doing the same thing. And they rely on doing a flyer that might not be paying for itself anymore. It's the same thing as you go into a very high velocity D2C e-com brand. What worked during the pandemic might not be working anymore. And you got to try new things, and you got to try and stay ahead of that curve. And so convincing people and showing them the math and showing them the modeling on what's working and what's not is as important as it used to be, probably more important. The difference being that there's so much more data now. There is so much more data, whereas before there wasn't as much data. Now it's almost like there's too much data, and you almost get lost in some of the data. What data is important, what data is not.
And how have you been able to sort of create this culture of experimentation, getting people to step into the mode of try and see, especially as I'm sure you're going to deal with competitors even in this segment. So how are you kind of pushing that envelope?
Yeah, I try and encourage, test and control method, as well as just piloting certain things and seeing, if you try something on a smaller scale and it works, how do you scale that up? And so we're looking at various things like that right now as a business. And that's something that, again, from an electronic e-com perspective, it might be a little bit easier to implement than it might have been back 15, 20 years ago from a bricks and mortar perspective.
Now, as a CFO, having been a CFO myself many decades ago, you have the pressure of, seeing all the, having all the financial responsibility for the company, working closely with the CEO. What have been some of the biggest challenges and moments of pressure that you've had to deal with looking back at your career now?
Back in my career, it's always, I usually have a very good relationship with the business owner, whether that be a corporate business owner or a founder. And it's always, getting them on side with a data-backed reason to do something. Oftentimes, instinct and gut instinct and art comes into play a lot, especially on the merchandising side at Sears or even at Nick's. And how do we balance the two? How do we give enough rope on the gut instinct side? Because a lot of the time that's the magic sauce. That's what actually makes people successful. If you think of leak-proof underwear, a lot of people said that wasn't going to be successful, and there was no data to support that it would be, but she kept with it, and it's blown up into this huge success. So you have to give enough credence to the gut and the art while trying to support as much of it as you can with data.
Well said. Garrett, we're looking at sort of the new dawn of technologies like AI and digital channels from social media to TikTok, Instagram, all being sort of creating a much more connected economy, technology disruption around every corner. What are you thinking about in terms of the future of your business, and in general, what are some of the new rules of business we should be thinking about?
I mean, the one that has my attention and curiosity right now is how much AI can help my business. So, we work in a very large creative requirement business, branding and creative art requirement, digital art and creative. And how much can AI kind of help that? Can it speed it up? Can it, take the pressure off some of the people that are working in those areas, even in the finance area? How much can AI kind of help and do so that, it takes more pressure and allows me to allocate my FTEs and my people resources more towards some of the more strategic things that we want to allocate it towards.
Now, my last question, we have a lot of audience members who are early stage entrepreneurs, emerging leaders, many in the finance field. If you were to give them any advice on how to challenge the status quo, how to keep pushing through resistance, what would it be?
It's know your numbers, understand how your business works, and understand the data. And the data never lies. And so if you can always understand how to relay that data and tell a story with that data to your audience, to your partners, that should always work well for you. You just need to understand how to make sure that you can show your partners how you both win. And so understanding that data and using that data, that's your strength, that's your side of the equation. And how do you bring that to a partnership or to a company and show them how you win with that data and how you win with understanding how your business works.
Garrett Denny, thank you very much for being on the Challenger X.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ben.